Boom, 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 boom. Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. You want me to turn up the fire? You want it? You want more fire? More. More fire. Bunch of troublemakers. More. Okay, is that good on the fire? Welcome home, everybody. We have to be quiet because Sugar Cookie is working. And if we get too loud, they're gonna know that she's watching. We gotta use our inside voices. Okay. I think for the moment, Discord is down. It's being a bit of a space bubble. So if you're having problems on Discord, that's why. It's not just you, it's me. Oh, wait, no. It's you. Okay. Everybody ready for this? The Notes. Book 2. Blue Moon, that was me that added you. That was me. But that's a good question. That's a good thing to check. So everybody say hi to Chow Chow. Chow Chow. We are starting on page 142. The surface of reality and the other side of the dream. Okay. Is that fire too loud if I'm talking at this level? Let me know, because I can adjust. I can make it a Goldilocks fire and it'll be just right. You can't hear it at all? It's good? Katarina, it's nice to see you again. It's been a while. It's a tiny touch low. Let's turn the fire up, shall we? We don't want to be a bit of a wanker with a low fire. Goodness gracious. There we go. It was a 70%. Is that perfect? Delightful. Louder. She wants it louder. That's 100% right there. Indubitably. How delightful. All right. I figured since we did a... Is that good? How is that? That's good right there? Perfect. Don't put the stick gate in the fire. That's like rule number 3. Okay. Here we go. Page 142. Jimin, 21 July, year 22. Junie and Hobie were caught up in the whirlwind brought on by the redevelopment news. We tiptoed around each other, unable to say a word about it. In reality, the map of the soul sounded more preposterous, but I kept thinking about it and wanted to find out more about it. When I left the practice room, I saw the road sign for the hospital. It was 10 minutes walking distance. With my hands in my pockets, I walked looking down. Not on purpose, but I looked up and saw my reflection in a shop window. I looked like a boy walking with stooped shoulders, or an old man without hope or will to live. The man's name was Woo Hyun Sung. He must have been my dad's age, but I couldn't be sure. He kept saying, "The map of my soul was wrecked." Hearing that, I used to wonder if the map of my soul was also wrecked. Were the people locked up in the ward because the map of their soul was wrecked and they no longer knew which direction they should be headed or what choice they should make? Yoongi, 21 July, year 22. I saw Jimin walking by himself during a break at the construction site. Surprised by how I looked, Jimin asked me, "What are you doing here?" "Making a living." Looking all dusty and sweaty in my work clothes must have seemed as unfamiliar to Jimin as it did to me. "Are you okay? Is something up with you?" Jimin asked cautiously. "Do I look okay to you? It hurts everywhere." "Well, then why are you—" Jimin didn't finish. What can I say? Would you understand if I said this is something I have to go through?" Glancing back and forth between me and the building in the middle of the construction site, Jimin simply looked baffled. "You're gonna go by yourself?" I asked when Jimin said he was on his way to the hospital. "Well, we can go together tomorrow." He has outpatient sessions only on Fridays. Today is Friday, so I have to go now. "You sure you'll be okay? Call me when you're done. I'll be waiting for your call." I watched as Jimin headed to the hospital. Because he knew I was watching him, he held his head up and shoulders straight and strutted on purpose. I wondered if he'd be okay. He had been locked up there for a long time. He pretended as if it didn't bother him, but I knew it was not an easy decision to make. Jimin, 21 July, year 22. Woo Hyun-sung did not show up until the waiting room monitor showed the end of sessions for the day. The outpatient waiting room became empty in no time. Had he gotten better so that he didn't need to see a doctor anymore? Well, what should I do then? There was no alternative. I headed to the front door, and as I turned, I saw the side hallway. The hallway I'd run down to escape from this hospital. I slowly walked toward it. I saw the kitchenette and the emergency staircase, and 3 more steps would be the end of the hallway. The imaginary line I'd drawn was gone. There were only the plain tiles you saw every day. I pushed open the door and came out. There was an alternative. The road to an alternative was there. I walked back into the hospital and headed to the office, to the off-limits ward. I took deep breaths. When the elevator was going up to the 8th floor, I got all tensed up and couldn't breathe well. Was I really okay? I hadn't had a fit yet, but it had only been 2 months. The hospital was still a place of fear, not to mention the off-limits ward. The elevator stopped at the 8th floor. There was no one at the entrance to the ward. To get inside, I had to pass through 3 iron doors. Without a permit, they didn't let anyone in. I had to wait for someone I knew to come out or go in. Since I knew all the nurses and employees at the ward... Hold on, make sure I'm not missing nothing here. I feel like any moment something's gonna fall out of the sky. Okay, sorry about that. Rondo, your sirens threw me off. I was like, uh-oh, something's wrong. All right, let's see. I had to wait for someone I knew to come out or go in. Since I knew all the nurses and employees at the ward, I didn't think it would take too long. Taking a deep breath, I leaned against a chair. This isn't bad. I can do this, I thought to myself. And time simply passed. Hey, escapee! An employee I knew came holding a tray. I'd known him during my days in the ward. What brings you back here? He teased me. I stood up and said hi. I didn't get to say goodbye to the nurses. I tried to look as innocent and guileless as I could, but my heart was pounding with my lips parched dry. I was going to wait here. Can you tell them I'm here? He opened the iron door with his card key and said, Wait in the lounge. I'll go tell them. I thanked and followed him in. A couple of people were leaving after their visitation, all looking gloomy. None of the people who came here were happy or cheerful. It was the same for the people who were locked up here and the people who had them locked up. It was the same with my parents. When they came to see me, they sat with their faces full of worry. Until I became a good boy who did what he was told to do, I cried and screamed every time my parents left. I would thrash about, kicking and screaming. "Mom, take me with you!" I heard it as soon as I walked into the lounge. Unwittingly, I walked back to the hallway, but I bumped into someone hard and was thrown down on the floor. I banged my head on the wall, and for a moment, the world became pitch black and white again. I felt a buzz in my head and heard the ringing in my ears. I tried to open my eyes, but I couldn't. When I finally opened my eyes, I saw a boy with tears streaming down his face. He was thrown to the floor like me. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Please take me with you, Mom." He tried to stand up, but slipped again, and a nurse came to get him. He was kicking and screaming, and he held on to my arm not to be dragged back. He kept calling out to his mom, but there was no one by the door. A couple more nurses came, and one of them gave him a shot in his arm. The boy gazed at me and said, "Can you please call my mom? Tell her to take me with her." His face was wet with tears. His body slowed down and soon became motionless, and the hand that was grabbing my arm fell limp onto the floor. "You shouldn't have seen this. I'm so sorry," one of the nurses said to me as they sat with me in the lounge. I told her I was fine, but I wasn't. I held my hands tight, but I was still shaking. I felt as if I was filled with something hot and mushy up to my throat. Unable to swallow it or spit it out, I felt I would suffocate on it. The nurse told me, "Jimin, it is normal not to be okay. It was heartbreaking for everyone. If this doesn't faze someone, then there's something wrong with that person." I nodded, I gritted my teeth, and I mentioned Mr. Hyun-sung. I tried to make it sound as casual as I could, but not sure I pulled it off. The nurse just didn't seem to notice anything peculiar and told me how he was. His session got rescheduled to Saturday. Nowadays, he suffers an attack every time he watches TV, so his appointment got scheduled to the last session on Saturday. I took the elevator down to the first floor. I was walking with my eyes fixed on the floor and holding the ends of my backpack when someone rapped my head. He rapped hard enough for me to see stars in front of my eyes. I lifted my head up and saw Yoongi standing there. "I told you to call me, but you didn't, and you didn't even answer my calls." He looked mad. I tried to smile. "Park Jimin," he said my name. He was worried about me. "I'm okay." "What do you mean you're okay when you look miserable? As if you've been starving for 3 days and got soaking wet in the rain. What happened?" "Nothing. And I'm okay." When I was spilling out those words, something hot and mushy, which I thought I'd swallowed down, surged back up into my throat. "Just something that happens to a normal person," was what I said as my eyes welled up. To hide my tears, I hung my head low. When Yoongi tapped my shoulder, the tears rolled down. "It's okay. Go ahead and cry." I burst into tears, and I couldn't stop. Yoongi, 22 July, year 22. "He's here." Hearing that from Jimin, I turned around and saw a man in hospital gown in the hallway. He looked mid-50s. Skinny with stooped shoulders. His face looked gray and he staggered. His shoulder must have hurt, for he was grabbing onto it with his hand. For a moment, I was reminded of Jin. The man didn't look anything like Jin. In the eyes, nose, and mouth, he looked completely different, but I saw Jin in his face. Jimin stood up and said hi to the hospital person who came with the man. And we heard a grating beep sound. Everyone frowned and looked up at the TV. Someone tried to turn the channel, but something went wrong with it, and it kept beeping. Covering my ears, I looked at Jimin, who was doing the same thing. The sound disappeared and the TV was back on. Why don't we take a look at the interview from a couple days ago and then continue our conversation, said the anchor. And Kim Chang-jun was on TV. Jimin, 22 July, year 22. That was when Mr. Wu suffered an attack. Ugh, a sound which didn't sound human came out of his mouth. His face became grotesquely distorted. The hospital person grabbed his arms. His mouth foamed and his spit splattered. An unintelligible scream spilled out of his mouth. His eyes were fastened onto the TV screen, and he kept writhing and screaming. He wanted to get closer to the TV. Because everyone had taken a step back, no one was near him. Clutching his head, he was down on the floor. The hospital person sighed and said, "He's like this every time. I don't think he can have an outpatient session." I squatted down to Mr. Wu. I patted his shoulder and looked down at him. Mixed emotions were boiling up inside me. What kind of torment was he trapped in? How had he endured this for 30 years? Was there an end to this suffering? "Sir!" Hearing me, he looked, but his eyes became blank again. While suffering the attack, he seemed to be thinking or remembering something, and to be in anguish because of it. But now he looked drained and empty. "Sir, do you remember me?" Yoongi, 22 July, year 22. Jimin watched for a long while as the man was dragged back to the off-limits ward. The man didn't get to see a doctor and was back in the elevator. He walked across the hospital lobby that was empty on this Saturday afternoon because visiting hours were over. And after calling him sir, Jimin couldn't continue. The map of the soul was important to us, but getting something out of the man in that state was cruel. When the man had stood up with the help of the hospital assistant, Jimin mumbled to himself, "I'm sorry." When we walked out of the hospital, the sun came beating down on us. Jimin finally opened his mouth and said, "Were you able to understand anything that he said?" His voice cracked, and it was obvious he was trying to get a hold of himself. When the man had been asked about the map of the soul, his face became grotesquely distorted. His eyes shone with rage, and he screamed convulsively. All I heard was, "Because of him, my soul was wrecked." Him. The man he was pointing to was Kim Chang-jun on TV. Considering how he was having a fit at the time, I'm sure it didn't mean anything, Jimin said. I thought so too. There was no reason to think that Jin's father was somehow involved. Well, let's go back to the words we did understand. After nodding his head for a long while, Jimin said, "He said something like, Giho. He said Giho was missing." Right. A Giho. The symbol? Then is it related to the map? And did he say something about a music room? Music room? Jimin looked at me. I don't remember hearing that. If he did say it, then he meant the music classroom. I heard that he got admitted when he was in high school. The high school music classroom, a Giho, and Assemblyman Kim Chang-jun. A combination that had nothing to do with each other. I'm sorry, Jimin said as we were out of the hospital entrance. You came all the way here on your day off for nothing. Jimin's phone went off at that moment. Taken aback, he looked at me. His phone said, Jungkook. I shook my head. We keep this between us, away from Jungkook. He has to focus on getting better. We can tell him when it's all over. If we can get away with never telling him, that would be even better. Jungkook, 22 July, year 22. The days in the hospital were tedious and boring. If I'd been hurt and felt pain somewhere, it might have been better. As I recovered, time passed by insanely slow. I'd be discharged a few days from now. My mom stopped by to see me from time to time, and so did my friends. The most recent visit was made by the police officer. I'd been told that there was an eyewitness a month ago, but he hadn't come forward. It happens all the time. You see how they'd find it bothersome, said the officer. He seemed to find this case bothersome too. Instead of finding the hit-and-run driver, he seemed more keen on closing the case. I looked out the window. Strangely enough, the surveillance video and my memories of that night replayed in my head every time I closed my eyes. I watched the accident taking place from different angles, and when I did, the car, which was faint in my memory, slowly took on the shape of Jin's car. And it was the same for the driver's face. Was I seeing what had happened that night, or just what I was suspicious of? I couldn't tell. It was then that I saw two people I knew walking across the hospital parking lot. They were Jimin and Yoongi. When they left the parking lot, they turned left. Why had they come here? And why didn't they stop by to see me? I called Jimin. The ringing continued for a long time until he picked up. Hello? Jungkook! The person outside the hospital also answered his phone. Where are you? You mean now? And Jimin didn't answer for a long time. The other guy outside the hospital shook his head. He was telling Jimin not to tell me. I'm on my way home from Hagwon. Why? Jimin answered awkwardly. No reason. Get home safely. And I hung up in a hurry. Why did they lie to me? Why did they even come here? Was it related to the police officer who had come to see me today? Or to the witness who wouldn't... I replayed what the officer had said. The witness had called 3 times, all from a public phone. He sounded urgent at first, but later on, he went back on his word and said he couldn't remember. Was the witness one of my friends? Yoongi, 22 July, year 22. I looked up at the hospital, trying to locate Jungkook's room, and I saw a room with its window ajar. Someone was looking down from it. As I was wondering whether it might be Jungkook, he closed the window and disappeared. I was thinking we should go up and see him now, but Jimin looked distraught. He was upset at having lied to Jungkook. Let's post what we've found out so far in the chat room, I said as I nudged his shoulder. Walking side by side, we clicked into the chat room. He said because of someone, his soul was wrecked. He mentioned the music room. I couldn't make heads or tails of what he was saying. Jimin. He was admitted when he was in high school, so he must have been talking about things from back then. It seems he'd been chased by someone. That was why he was admitted of his own volition. I thought he was just saying stuff, but maybe it's related to something. Tae. All we did was find the office of Assemblyman Kim Chang-jun, so we got nothing to show for it as well. Assemblyman Kim Chang-jun? That man in the hospital said Kim Chang-jun wrecked his soul. And there was a sudden silence. So the place Junie and Tae went to, and the person we went to see were all related to Jin's father. Jimin. Jin's dad and the map of the soul. What are they about? Tae. We should find out more about it. Jin's father might know something too. Junie. I'll ask my boss at the gas station first. He said he knew Jin's dad back in high school. Tae. That's a good idea. But Hobie is not reading the text. Does anybody know what's up with him? Jimin? Jimin. I called him, and he said he was busy with Yangji Children's Home. Is something up with the orphanage? Jimin. They're going to get rid of it because of the redevelopment. He sounded pretty terrible, so I was going to go see him. Junie. What? The orphanage? Junie, 22 July, year 22. What have I done? My heart sank. I looked out the window from the gas station office. Area 4. I tried to think where the place which I'd known only as a number was. What Tay and I'd done sent ripples throughout the whole city. My boss said because of the paper about the police overlooking the would-be violence, the redevelopment plan would get underway sooner. They would speed up clearing out the container village and rebuilding Area 4. Someone was bound to make huge money. Some said Songju would be reborn as a new city, but some would lose their homes and be forced to move. And the Yangji Children's Home was included. What would happen if the orphanage was cleared out? Where's Hobie now? What are you thinking about? My boss walked into the office. Boss, if they clear out the orphanage in Area 4, will they relocate it to somewhere else? He turned his head in disbelief. Would you if it was up to you? They'll just scatter the kids to different institutions. The Yangji Children's Home is in Area 4, isn't it? It was there even before I was born. This place is sure going to change now. Boss, you graduated from Songju Jail High School. No? So? Well, did you go to school with Kim Chang-jun, the assemblyman? No way. He is much younger than me. He probably went to school with my brother. Well, did anything happen when you were in school? Jimin, 23 July, year 22. I sat in front of the computer and searched online. Kim Chang-jun. The page showed his profile, his age, the schools he graduated from, his party name, National Future Party, and that he was serving his third term. He was elected when he was only in his early 40s, but he was already serving his third term, a promising career for a politician. I clicked on his official blog under the profile. In the introduction, it said he made legal improvements concerning construction, as well as living conditions, and contributions to rebuilding the city. The site provided links to the bill he drafted to support new startups and medium-sized companies. The bill lay out the foundation for a building and technology belt with about 50 different companies in one area. The comments in the article voiced worries that because of the changed construction law, there were more shoddy constructions and expedient manipulations. But those comments didn't attract that much attention. There were more comments about supporting him since he was trying to build a technology belt in the city. I came back to his profile and read other news about him. They were mostly articles about the Songju City redevelopment plan. Only 8 pages later did I find different news about his visit to his high school. The title was, National Assembly Member Kim Chang-jun gives scholarship to his alma mater, Songju Jail High School. There was a picture of Kim Chang-jun and the principal smiling and shaking hands. While reading some more news articles, I read an odd comment. Kim Chang-jun fought with Jo Jin-myung as if it would only end when one of them dropped dead. But now they are smiling and shaking hands. That's how scary politics is. I read all the other comments too. One said Kim Chang-jun spent an extra year in high school. The comment said, he's in politics, but he couldn't even graduate from high school on time like everybody else. What kind of trouble did he get himself into? I remembered what Junie had heard from his boss. One of Kim Chang-jun's high school friends went missing, and he was never found. Was the comment right? Did Jin's dad repeating a year in high school have something to do with his missing friend? If not, why did he take a year of absence? I searched some more, but there were no new leads. I searched online for Principal Jo Jin Myung. Since they had been in high school together, there might be some new information. Songjujil High School Principal. The page had a link to the school and his short profile. The page also had articles and information about people with the same names, but I found a blog uploaded about 10 years ago. The missing student from Songjujil High School. Was Principal Jo Jin Myung involved? No comment was his answer. The blog captured and uploaded a page which had been deleted. Below the captured page, the blogger provided an explanation. Jo Jin Myung argued that it was groundless defamation and he sued the reporter for libel. Is it alma mater? Alma mater? I thought it was alma mater. Alma mater? Alma mater? Alma mater. Alma mater. Alma mater. I'm malfunctioning. I sound like JoJo. Alma mater. Right? Alma mater? Mater. Mater. Like me mater. Me mater's coming to the house. Mater. Rude but true. Alma mater. Alma mater. Okay. Thank you. I wasn't sure and I guessed and I was wrong. I'm never wrong. You were here. Tay, 23 July, year 22. My uncle's barbecue restaurant was located in downtown Guangdong. The barbecue place only had a couple of round tin tables, and it was in the downtown, but at the very end of a dirty back alley. Sounds lovely. The last time I was there was with my mom, so it must have been 10 years ago. My uncle had called for the first time in 5 years. I hadn't called him or texted. I got off the bus and crossed the road. The bars in line on the street were getting ready to open. I was there to see my uncle after all this time to get the information about Jin's father. My mom and uncle were all born and raised in Songju City. My uncle had graduated from Songjujil High and was around Kim Chang-jun's age. When I opened the restaurant door, my uncle was sweeping the floor. Without even shooting a glance in my direction, he greeted with, "Welcome." Not hearing a response, he straightened his back and saw me. I nodded a hello. We sat at a table in the otherwise empty restaurant. "How are you? And how's your sister?" He asked about us. Obviously, we were not doing great. Why ask? Does he want me to say how bad off we are with my own mouth? "Tay, your mother was..." I interrupted him and asked, "Uncle, you went to the same high school as Mr. Kim Chang-jun, didn't you?" He looked puzzled. "By Kim Chang-jun, you mean the member of the National Assembly?" I nodded. "I did, but why do you ask?" I risked sounding rude, and I told him straight out, "You don't need to know. Can you tell me why Kim Chang-jun repeated a year in school? Did it have something to do with the missing student?" I didn't risk sounding rude. I was rude. He hadn't done anything wrong. I was mad at my mom, not at her brother. Still, I was as mad at him as if I had the right to be, and I put him on the spot. "I don't remember much because it happened such a long time ago." I'm trying to recall the old memories. He said, "When that boy went missing, Kim Chang-jun lost it and went looking for him. He didn't show up for classes. He roamed the town and school, and because of that, he had to repeat an entire year. Everyone said he went crazy. And one day, Chang-jun was found collapsed in the music room in the annex, and that was it. He stopped looking for the missing friend, and he didn't show up at school until he came back to repeat the year. He must have been in shock because when he came back, he was completely changed. He had no friends, and he didn't smile or get angry. It's as if he had no feelings." Maybe he had amnesia. To my question, my uncle glanced at me and said he didn't know. Well, we weren't that close, but I felt he'd become cold. His eyes looked different. I don't know how to explain it, but his eyes looked empty. Before that, he'd been outgoing and gotten along well with his friends. But why are you asking about Kim Chang-jun and so out of the blue? Tay, is something going on with you? A look of worry crept over his face. I frowned with my lips pressed shut. He looked like my mom with an expression she used to have, the expression which I couldn't really recall anymore. I told him no, and I felt bad about being mad at him and having acted so rudely. I told him nothing was going on with me and that I was completely fine. I said goodbye and headed out. Tay! My uncle called my name, but I didn't look back. Tay, wait! I heard him chasing after me. I considered walking faster, but I suddenly remembered that the music room was on the 3rd floor. The music room in the annex? I turned and asked, which one is the annex building? My uncle made a face to say he didn't understand the question, and with an, he said, they have a new building, don't they? Well, back in our day, they also used the same building, the small one, on the left-hand side of the gate. You know that one-story building? The music room was in there. That was our hangout place. The old building where the classroom turned storage room with a piano was. What had happened to Kim Chang-jun there? Tay, here. And he gave me a note with something written on it in a hurry. Jimin, 23 July, year 22. I searched for the map of the soul with my phone, but decided to give up. Jin must have done the same. He'd asked the doctor, so it was likely that he'd already checked it out at the library and asked his professors. And the phone rang. Tay. Junie was right. When Jin's father was in school, his best friend went missing. And he repeated a year because he went around looking for his friend. And you know our classroom? It used to be a music room 30 years ago. And something must have happened to Jin's father in that room. Junie. Our classroom? Which one? Tay. You know, our lair. The classroom turned storage room. Junie. That used to be a music room? Tay. Yeah, remember how it had a piano? If his friend has been missing for over 30 years, wouldn't he be dead already? Yoongi. He might be alive somewhere, hiding his identity. Like that guy in the psychiatric ward. Didn't you say that guy was there, hiding from something? He's been there for more than 30 years. And then Mr. Wu, Jin's dad, the missing student, and principal were all alumni? Tay. Jo Jin-myung, principal, who looks like a toad? Yes, our school principal, Yoongi. Don't you remember? Well, how could I forget the guy? Well, what about him, though? I think he was also involved in the case of the missing student. And when I Googled it, the principal and Jin's dad were in school at the same time. Here, I'll upload the article. Yoongi. The principal must have been involved then. Junie. Because it happened so long ago, I couldn't find any more articles about it. Yoongi. Well, there should be newspaper articles. Junie says, you're right. There must be a way to find out more. Tay. I just passed the bus stop at the Jungang Park. I'm going to get off soon and stop by our classroom turned storage room. Junie says, would anything be in there still? Yoongi. We have to do something, though. I'll be there, too. Be there if you have time. Tay, I'm in the practice room. I'll be there in 10. No, 15. Junie, 23 July, year 22. I knew a place that had old newspapers. Songju City Library, the biggest one in the city. I went there once a month to borrow books which I couldn't find in the neighborhood library. The city library closed at 6 on Sunday. I had to hurry. The bus arrived at the stop in front of the library. I took the elevator and went straight to the 4th floor. The security guard told me I had only an hour before the library closed. I gave the librarian my ID and went into the archives room. The place smelled of old paper. Every bookshelf was marked with a year. Reading the articles that Jimin had sent, I found the exact year. The newspapers were chronologically categorized by national papers to regional ones. I took out the regional papers. I glanced down at the March papers. I couldn't see the word missing anywhere. Time ticked away faster than I thought. While reading the June papers, I found an article about the missing student. A student missing from Songju High School. That was it. The missing student's name was Choi Gi-ho. The article had an interview with his mother. He left home saying he was going to see a friend. I asked him which friend and why so late, and he said he had to see his friend at school. He definitely looked scared, and I don't know why I didn't stop him. Below the article was the missing student's picture, name and description of what he was wearing. Choi Gi-ho, a senior in Songju High School. It said the police were looking into the possibility of bullying or his being a runaway. I remembered what Yoongi had said. The guy on the psychiatric ward had mentioned a missing Gi-ho. Did he mean a missing student? I spread open the next day's newspaper. I needed more information, but there wasn't any. And it was the same for the next day's paper. Is a missing student a trivial case? I couldn't understand how it only showed up once. When I was about to look for the next month's papers, the librarian said the library was closing. I took a picture of the article with my phone, just in case. That day, Choi Gi-ho had gone to school after getting a call from someone. Maybe he went to that classroom turned storage room. Had Kim Chang-jun called him? If that was the case, Kim Chang-jun wouldn't have gone looking for Choi like some crazy person. Then who told Choi to come to school? What happened in that classroom? Tae, 23 July, year 22. The old classroom door creaked open. The air trapped inside slowly crept out, and there was a familiar scene in front of my eyes. Our classroom. I looked around. The classroom, empty except for piles of discarded stuff, seemed to have aged. The flashlight from my phone shined on broken desks and chairs and rolled up event placards strewn about on the floor. The boxes with old newspapers and school papers, the walls filled with doodles and scribbles, and the piano. I stood in the middle of the classroom. What had happened here? Jimin arrived, followed by Junie and Yoongi. Junie told us what he'd found at the library. Choi Gi-ho had gone to school after getting a call from someone, and he might have come to this place, or somewhere else, but it's possible that he'd come here. Yoongi asked, was it Kim Chang-jun who called Choi here? Junie said, Kim Chang-jun apparently went around looking for Choi like a crazy person, so that seems unlikely. It seems more possible that someone else called Choi and then he went missing. Well, then who called him? And what had happened in this classroom? I said to all, Choi Gi-ho is still missing, and Woo Hyun-sung is not in a state to tell us anything. Then there is only one person left. We stood still in the dark. Everyone's flashlight was pointing at the floor. I looked around. Jimin was squatting in front of the wall. Yoongi was on the piano chair. Junie was writing something on the window with his finger. It feels like we're back in school, now that we're all here at night, Junie said after some time had passed. Back in school? I would hate to be back in school, Yoongi chuckled and said. Well, things haven't changed, have they? Every time I think this is the hardest ever, something else happens to outdo it. Nothing surprises me anymore. Junie said cheerlessly, "Yeah, why is the world like that? It's not like we made the world this way. We were born and found it like this. Why is it that we were just thrown into the world without means to do anything about it?" Classic Junie. "Well, what should we do?" And when Jimin said that, Junie sighed and said, "Well, we should go and talk to Jin first. Ask him about the map of the soul and about his dad." And Jimin asked, "Well, after that, what?" Junie said, "I don't know, but we should start with those questions." Before Junie was finished, Jimin stood up and said, "Look here, this is Jin's father's name." We stepped closer to where Jimin was pointing. Among so many scribbles, there were several names. With our phone flashlights, we read each name. Kim Chang-jun was one of them. Jimin pointed to another name. Woo Hyun-sung, the guy on the psychiatric ward. I can't recognize the other names. Yoongi pointed to another name. Choi Gu-ho, the guy who went missing, right? Junie read a sentence below the names. Everything started from here. What nobody saw. Tae, 24 July, year 22. 2 weeks ago today, we decided to throw Jungkook a party to celebrate his being discharged from the hospital. We said, let's throw him a party when JK comes out of the hospital. And we completely forgot about it. With so many things that had happened since then, I had gone everywhere in Songju City with Junie, looking for that building, including the classroom. On top of everything, the redevelopment plan had turned the whole city upside down. I didn't know how time passed by so fast, and I had only remembered Jungkook's last day in the hospital the day before. We had just left the classroom, and while talking about how to ask Jin about his father, someone said we should ask him about Jungkook's welcome back party. Will Jin show up? Oh, we have to make him. Well, how? Well, I don't know. We all realized it only then. Jungkook would be coming home from the hospital tomorrow. We looked at each other surprised. The truth was that none of us paid much attention to JK. We had been preoccupied because of Jin, but that did not change the fact that we had been forgetful about Cookie. Should I give him a call? And when I said that, Junie said no. It's past midnight. Let's throw him an awesome party. Hobie, you take care of the food as always. Tae, how about bringing party hats and stuff? Jimin, and Jimin said, I'll get him a present. He'll like a sketchbook. Well, how about you, Yoongi? And when Junie asked, Yoongi's face broke into a smile, and he said, my presence at the party will be the present. Junie, what are you going to do? Well, I'm providing the place for the party. We said to meet for the welcome back party at 7 in the evening the next day. I hung about the gas station waiting for Junie to get off work. We have to hurry. They let me out so late, we're not going to make it, said Junie. He bowed a goodbye to his boss and walked towards me. I stood up. We'll get there after 7. We walked side by side toward Junie's container. Do you think Jin will come? Junie answered. I'm not sure, but I think he'll probably come. I texted him. What did you say in the text? We should talk about the map of the soul. Jimin, 24 July, year 22. I opened the container door and walked in to find no one. The air inside, heated by the afternoon sun, rushed out as if it had waited for the door to open. I fumbled to turn on the light. The fluorescent light flickered balefully before the room finally became bright. I was 10 minutes late, but I was the first one there. I turned on the fan and looked at my watch. 7:10. What happened, everyone? Did something happen? Were they on their way here or not? The place looked too empty to have a party. I gave a quick look around the place, but there wasn't anything I could use to make the place more presentable for the party. I mean, there was some of Junie's stuff, but definitely no balloons or party hats or pizza or cupcakes or cheese balls or Cheez-Its or pretzels with cheese or hot mustard, M&Ms. On some pieces of paper I found, I wrote, "Welcome back, home, and Jungkook," and taped them on the wall. But they only made the place look more pathetic. I should have just done a better job writing those words. I regretted it as I straightened the papers on the wall. I checked the chat room to make sure that everyone was on their way. 10 more minutes passed. A train passed by, shaking the whole container. Seeing the whole world shaking through the open door, I thought back on the day when I had banged open the hospital door and run away. Could I have done it if Tay, JK, and all the others weren't there for me? Finally. Just because there's a door, an open door, doesn't mean that you can walk through it and step out from where you are. Maybe Jin was trapped somewhere, waiting for someone to knock on the door. Nothing was certain. I wasn't sure if we could help him. I wished the small pieces of information we had stumbled upon would provide some hints. And while I was thinking this, the container door finally opened. "There's only you here?" said Yoongi. Hobie, 24 July, year 22. Ever since it was announced the Yangji Children's Home was included in the redevelopment plan, the orphanage people had been fighting a war every day. A war without firing any bullets. A war fought in silence and growing fear. The city and the people working for Assemblyman Kim Chang-jun refused to answer any of our questions. We asked them to release the relocation plan for Yangji Children's Home. Not a difficult request, but their silence spoke louder than any words. If they had a plan, they would have competed to be the first one to make the announcement. Yangji Children's Home would be relocated to so-and-so area. But they did not say anything. And by not saying anything, they made it clear that they meant to send the kids to different institutions. I don't know who threw the egg. One of the orphanage aunts or someone who grew up there. Nobody knows who started the fight. The protesters, well, it would be a stretch to call the orphanage people protesters, but they got into a physical fight with the aides. And what took place couldn't really be described as a physical fight. We always felt intimidated by others. Even when we tried to act confident, the world saw us as pitiful. People saw us as either dangerous or pathetic. People who lived off others' taxes. One of the orphanage aunts tumbled down the stairs and several older kids were taken away by the police. One aunt collapsed and was taken to the hospital. Even the aunt who was resting from the orphanage work due to her illness showed up at City Hall. I only found out about all this when I was almost done with my shift. Things were busy at work with too many customers today. Dragging my bad leg, I headed to the hospital. Everyone was squatting in front of the surgery room. They all looked pretty bruised up. Even then, they were surprised by my leg. "What happened to your leg?" "Well, how did you get hurt?" I said, "I fell on the slippery street the other day. It's nothing." And after giving them a quick answer, I sat next to my aunts. It didn't take me long to figure it out, though. Everyone felt broken, not from any physical pain, but from a sense of defeat. This fighting will get us nowhere. This self-defeatist attitude that had been with us for so long that now it was ingrained deep in our minds. The silence in the hospital hallway was suffocating. No one spoke. Can we win this fight? What can I do? I couldn't even cry. And then I heard my phone ringing with a text from Tay. "Where are you? Everyone's here." with Jin's picture attached. Junie, 24 July, year 22. After waiting for Hobie, who didn't text us back, we started the party without him. Because Hobie wasn't there, we had no cake or candles or M&Ms or cheese balls. With JK sitting in the center, we awkwardly clapped and sang a song. Welcome back home, dear Jungkook. Yoongi flicked his lighter instead of candles. Make your wish here. When JK stayed motionless with his eyes fixed on the lighter, Yoongi said, "So, you got no wish? Well, then make a wish not to get hurt again." And the papers on the wall flapped because of the fan. Jin sat leaning against the wall the whole time, looking like someone who had been dragged there against his will. He watched us and then checked the time on his watch out of boredom. I asked him, "What are you thinking?" Jin slowly turned around. My heart sank seeing his cold eyes. He looked different compared to when I had first met him at the gas station or at the street pub a couple days ago. He seemed colder now. "You asked about the map of the soul last time?" Hearing the map of the soul, Jin's eyes changed. "Ask your dad about it." Jin scowled. He must have thought I was just pulling things out of a hat. When I was about to explain, Hobie rushed in. "I didn't think you'd come." Hobie paid no attention to what Jimin said and walked across the container and went straight to Jin. He wasn't even limping. Hobie said, "We need to talk." "Finally!" But Jin pushed away Hobie's hand and said in a low voice, "I got nothing to say. If you have something to say, say it here." The tension between the two people were palpable. Hobie said in a trembling voice, "Can you please tell your dad to take the children's home out of the redevelopment plan? If that's too difficult, can he look for a place where he can relocate together? He's your dad. You can ask him." Hobie had never looked so desperate. Jin listened without moving a muscle and said, "That's grown-up business." The air inside the container seemed still. Dumbfounded, Hobie stared at Jin. Hobie spoke in a very low voice. "You know what the place means to me. How could you talk to me as if talking to a stranger? How could you?" And for an instant, Jin flinched. He scowled again and rubbed his temples. He pushed his hand against the wall and stood up. "Until when do I have to look after you guys? Can you please learn to do things by yourselves?" And Jin banged open the door and left.